said, that's been the general concern. Of course, figures are debated, and there's always talk about how much debt servicing, how much, as far as the IMF involvement is concerned. I'm talking in very, very layman terms. But what kind of policies will this budget bring, in your opinion, which will have trickle-down effect? What do you think?
To have a trickle-down effect, you have to have activity and consumption.
Right.
So that's what the government is focusing on. They're talking about, our finance minister was talking about growth through activity and consumption.
Right.
If you recall, in the 2000s, we had a lot of consumption starting sometime around 2003. So that was because interest rates were brought down, and you had a lot of money flowing into, for example, the stock market, into the other markets, and you had a lot of activity happening in Pakistan. And for approximately 5 to 7 solid years, we had a lot of growth. Our GDP actually started spiking until the violence started. So when our finance minister talks about when he talks about aggressive growth, he's talking about activity and consumption, and that will happen only when interest rates remain low, when basically there's stability in policy and in the social order, and people are allowed to sort of do business more freely when it comes to tax and regulations and things like that. So, but the intention is very clear. The government has been very clear about a 3.94%, as you said, can be debated, but right now that's the official figure.
Right.
Even if it is more or less, that's not the point. The point is there's been a recovery.
Okay.
And there's been a broad-based recovery in agriculture services, manufacturing, and even large-scale manufacturing, which experienced a lot of growth, just shy of 10%. So what we're talking about is that when an economy is supposed to grow, let's be very frank and very simple about it. There has to be a lot of activity in it. So the government is focusing towards more activity, and that will depend on a few things which the government is going to try to cater for in the budget. However, the budget will be dominated by debt servicing, PSTP allocations, and defense expenditures.
Okay. What are some of the things you're saying that some of the things that that activity will depend upon?
Activity depends upon, just take yourself as an example. Why would you consume more?
Okay.
Because you can. That sounds very, overly simplistic, but that's the truth.
But doesn't that imply that people will have money to spend?
That's where the trickle-down thing starts. You see, when the economy starts moving from the top, from the big players or the big parties, or let's say from the top end, that's where the trickle-down starts, into the smaller groups, into the SMEs, into the micro-SMEs, into the households, into the salaried individual. There has to be more activity. Let's put this into very plain, simple language.
Okay, let me come back to you. We'll talk more about that. I'm going to go to you. Faheem Saab, according to Shan Saab, he's saying that we have to let millionaires become billionaires before that can happen. I think you said essentially the same thing. You said that we will have to let people do better, better in their businesses. People get richer before it translates down. Am I right?
Yes, because that's the natural economic process. We cannot have I won't get into the depths of a controlled economic structure as is communism or socialism and laissez-faire, as in totally free market economy. We live in a reasonably regulated free market economy. It's supposed to be both. In that sense, economic activity must not be hindered. It must be allowed to grow.
So when you say when we say things like people-friendly and growth-oriented budget, are these generic terms, or do they specifically mean some policies that the government is going to undertake?
They have become generic terms over the years, but this is what I think the government is trying to do. They're trying to make it meaningful. For example,
so how does this budget get people-friendly and growth-oriented?
Well, it's going to be, if it makes sense, if it's practical, if it's trying to do something. You don't have to achieve something to achieve something. You have to try to achieve something, and you can walk the rest of the way. That's a practical application of life. You see, we cannot just go by bookish understanding of anything. We have to be practical about Pakistan right now. Has done some amazing things, and I'm very happy that one of our colleagues has pointed out something that I've been pointing out on all the programs that I've been on, that the government of Pakistan in the past 2 years has returned more than 200 billion rupees in stuck tax refunds. I don't hear anybody talk about this. it was the businessmen who were screaming at the top of their lungs that our money stuck in FPR. That money's been returned. Now it's being done electronically, automatically. I don't hear anyone talking about it. So there's a certain sense of pessimism that we need to get over. I'm over it. So that's why I'm talking about the future. So you said the budget. The budget will be constrained, and I'll start with constraints first. With the debt, with the PSTP expense, and the government defense expenditure. Now, defense is not skyrocketing. It's gradually growing, and at one period it sort of plateaued. But you see, an expenditure is not a problem as long as you make money. Now, if Pakistan can increase its tax revenues, its exports, and very importantly, I'm going to say this very, very intensely, as long as we can plug our hemorrhages.
I'm just going to save that quote for my husband. An
Okay.
expenditure is not a problem as long as you make money.
And you can of course tell him someone told you that, and I'll be in trouble. The point is that if Pakistan can just start plugging its hemorrhages, cash and non-cash hemorrhages, something that I'm studying, and believe me, we have enough money. I know this sounds crazy, but that is the truth. You cannot expect to have a happy nation or a happy budget or a happy survey with your water left open, that nobody's being held accountable for anything. You have to sort of plug those holes. The piping must not leak anywhere, and then you can talk about hardcore planning and this and that. Right now, in summary, what I'm trying to say is that at least the government has shown an intent. Actually, not today, but since it came in that we're going to grow, but with discipline.
So then, before I go to Ramesab, so then in terms of the last budget, if you compare, are we in a better position today?
I think the government at a macro level is in a much better situation. How your fiscal space is better, you've got more foreign exchange coming in through market mechanisms, not through simply loans, because although some of the Russian digital accounts, around about 70%, can be called loans. Now, at the end of the day, that's a market phenomena that we've created for ourselves. That's the right thing to do. But in last year, it was like a firefighting budget. This time, it appears that there might be more room to play with, because as our colleagues were saying, and I'll just add the numbers to it. For 11 months, the FPR collected 4.1 trillion rupees, as opposed to 3.5 trillion in the last 11 months. So that's like a huge increase, and that's in a COVID situation. And if, yes, we need to increase our tax base and all that, but at least we're trying.
Do you think that, let me go to Ramesab. Ramesab, do you think, we've been talking consistently since this government came in, they've been stressing on increasing the tax base. The last question from you, very basic question. When the common man, or you look at the budget, they want to assess what's going down, what's coming up. So again, I want to go there. I want to ask: do you think that in terms of pricing, there's going to be some relief? You think there's going to be some relief for the people in terms of, perhaps the inflation coming down, the food necessary items perhaps going down a little bit, because that's been a cause of concern.
Yes, of course, inflation has been a major issue, and one of the ways of dealing with inflation is to start managing, not manipulating, managing supply. It's about demand and supply. I won't get into that in too much depth, but the point is the budget will, I think, definitely, and I'm pretty sure this is what's going to happen. The budget is going to have some kind of a link to consumption, linked to price. Now, if you consume more, you'll pay more. If you consume less, you will pay less. So there's going to be some kind of attempted balancing act for low consumers, for smaller users, and we'll see how that plays out.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being with us, Faheem.